So, can the US handle its enormous budget deficit? The US has approximately $30 trillion in external debt. That is an enormous figure as a proportion of the global economy, and it has ramifications going forward. The question is, can the US manage this enormous sum and the corollary of the enormous debt burden that it has to bear? So, on the yes side, we have 3 points. One is growth maxing. So Larry Fink has been speaking on CNBC recently saying the US can grow at 3% a year for the next decade because of AI, and that will significantly help reduce the burden of this enormous debt pile. And it's called growth maxing. So you just got to max out your growth, and that will reduce the relative size of the debt burden compared to the economy as a whole. 2, interest rates are set to fall. The consensus is that interest rates will be around the 3% over the next couple of years. And as interest rates go down, the debt burden for future new issuance, the interest rates paid on that debt, will reduce. So it's a bit easier for the US to carry on funding its deficit. A third point on why the US can cope with its debt burden is because it still has economic levers to pull. It can still reduce or try to reduce healthcare costs. It can increase the age when people receive Social Security. And they can also make a national sales tax. Their sales tax income as a proportion of their economic size is a lot lower than most of Western Europe. But how about the no? A lot of people are worried that this is something on the horizon. We're kind of we're growing and treading water. Things feel okay. Everyone's making their own financial economic decisions. But at the end, there's going to be an enormous crash. And the world superpower won't be able to cope with the deficits that it's been running. And there's some power to those arguments. And 3 points on that are: 1, it's politically very, very difficult to cut this budget deficit. A Reddit user summed up by saying, increased tax while cutting spending is political suicide. And we've seen that Doge, formerly Elon Musk's Doge, has not been nearly as impactful as was hoped. And 2, the US doesn't have any geopolitical room to move. The US needs to be able to flex its economy for war and pandemic. And with such a huge budget deficit as a proportion of its economy as a whole, I mean, we're at post-World War II levels when the US was funding an enormous war. We're at that position, but we're not post-World War II. We are post a pandemic, but the last few years has been relatively benign economically, and debt just keeps spiraling. It seems out of control. So the US doesn't have much room to maneuver. 3, and this is kind of a sensitive one, it's just more of a personal opinion, that the US is positioning itself to be attacked in future geopolitically through its debt. If foreign buyers buy a lot of US debt and then dump it onto the market, that means future US debt issuance will be much more expensive because the world doesn't trust it as much. US domestic buyers won't want to hold it as much if they feel that holding is a higher risk. Currently, US T-bills are seen as the last stop. They're seen as basically the no-risk option. That could change, and that would make the US budget deficit much harder to finance and create much more instability around the US finances. Now, also, the US greenback will be impacted if there's a run on US bonds. The dollar will get weaker, will have less influence, and as a corollary, less stability. Please give your opinions below, and please sign up, subscribe to this channel for future videos. Thank you.